Case 1. Marybeth Tinning. Schenectady, New York. January of 1972. A woman walks into Ellis Hospital. She is carrying her dead 2-year-old son. The doctors try to figure out what happened. They come up with nothing. They let her go home. 17 days later, she brings her 4-year-old daughter. Dead. Same woman. Same hospital. Same city. No arrest. No investigation. No alarm. And this was only the beginning. Marybeth Rowe Tinning was born on September 11, 1942, in Duanesburg, New York, a small, quiet town outside Schenectady that most people never heard of and even fewer remembered. She was the kind of woman who could walk through a crowd and leave no impression. Average height, blonde hair, blue eyes, a face that seemed designed for sympathy. And sympathy was exactly what she craved, because she had never received enough of it in her life. Her father, Alton Lewis Rowe, was a World War II veteran who returned from the Pacific changed in all the worst ways. Marybeth later told investigators he locked her in closets. He hit her with a fly swatter because, she said, his arthritis made a belt too painful to swing. A family relative told her bluntly, the way only cruel people tell the truth, she was an unwanted, accidental child. She absorbed that message the way a dry field absorbs a match. She told her brother, "You were the one they wanted, not me." She made multiple childhood suicide attempts. When she graduated from Duanesburg High School in 1961, she was president of the Future Homemakers of America. She worked as a nursing assistant at Ellis Hospital, the same hospital where she would later bring her dead children. She met Joseph Tinning, known as Joe, on a blind date in 1963. They married in the spring of 1965. Joe got a job at General Electric's turbine plant. On the surface, everything looked normal. But Marybeth Tinning was not normal. And the terrible proof of that would unfold over 14 years, 9 children, and a body count that should have been stopped a decade before it was. The first death, the only one investigators later determined was almost certainly natural, was Jennifer Lynn Tinning. Born December 26, 1971. Dead January 3, 1972. 8 days old. She died of hemorrhagic meningitis contracted before birth. Jennifer never left the hospital. Her death was real, devastating, and completely legitimate. And it was the spark that lit Marybeth Tinning's fire. The attention she received after Jennifer's death was unlike anything she had ever experienced in her 40 years of feeling invisible. Neighbors brought food. Church members prayed. People called. People came. People held her and wept. For the first time in her life, Marybeth Tinning was the center of the universe, and she did not want that feeling to stop. 17 days after Jennifer's death, January 20th, 1972, Marybeth rushed 2-year-old Joseph Jr. to the Ellis Hospital emergency room, claiming seizures. Doctors found nothing wrong. They kept the boy for observation. They released him. Hours later, Joseph Jr. was dead on arrival at that same hospital. No autopsy was performed. 6 weeks later, on March 2, 1972, 4-year-old Barbara died after what doctors described as Rye syndrome. A nurse at Ellis Hospital wanted to report her suspicions. A physician told her to mind her own business. 3 deaths. 3 children. 90 days. The community rallied. People wept. Marybeth received more sympathy, more attention, more casseroles than any mother in Schenectady's history. She went home. She got pregnant. She had another baby. On December 10, 1973, 18-day-old Timothy died. Marybeth told doctors she found him lifeless in his crib. The pathologist ruled sudden infant death syndrome, SIDS. The catch-all diagnosis that in 1973 meant nothing more than, "we have no idea." 14 years later, Marybeth would confess to smothering Timothy with a pillow. On September 2, 1975, 5-month-old Nathan died in the car while Marybeth was driving. She arrived at St. Clair's Hospital with the baby already gone, claiming he had suddenly stopped breathing. SIDS again. She later confessed to smothering him with a pillow too. 2 more children followed. Mary Frances, born October 29, 1978, dead February 22, 1979. Jonathan, born in the fall of 1979, dead March 24, 1980, after weeks at Boston Children's Hospital where doctors found nothing wrong. And then came the death that destroyed the one theory the medical community was quietly clinging to, the idea that maybe, just maybe, Something genetic was killing the Tinning children. In August of 1978, the Tinnings adopted a little boy. His name was Michael. He had no blood relation to Marybeth Tinning. No shared genetics. No inherited anything. Michael died March 2, 1981. He was approximately 2.5 years old. The genetic theory died with him. Still, nobody arrested Marybeth Tinning. Then came Tammy Lynn. Born August 22, 1985. She was the 9th Tinning child, and she would be the last. The pediatrician who treated Tammy Lynn, a doctor named Bradley Ford, had serious concerns. He recommended a breathing and heart rate alarm monitor. He told Marybeth it could save her daughter's life. Marybeth refused. On the night of December 20th, 1985, Tammy Lynn was sleeping on the couch. She began to cry. In Marybeth's own words, later given in confession, "I finally used the pillow from my bed and put it over her head. I held it until she stopped crying. She moved the pillow back to her bed, screamed for Joe, and performed CPR, stupid as it sounds," she said. "But I knew that she wasn't alive anymore." This time, the doctors at St. Clair's Hospital called the New York State Police. Forensic pathologist Dr. Michael Baden, the same Michael Baden who would go on to become one of the most recognized names in American forensic medicine, reviewed 14 years of autopsy files. His conclusion was unambiguous. Tammy Lynn was smothered. The pattern across all 9 deaths was consistent with homicide. On February 4, 1986, detectives asked Marybeth to come to state police headquarters in Loudonville for a voluntary interview. After hours of patient, persistent questioning, she broke. She signed a 36-page confession. In it, she admitted to murdering Tammy Lynn, Timothy, and Nathan. "I did not do anything to Jennifer, Joseph, Barbara, Michael, Mary Frances, Jonathan," she said. "Just these 3, Timothy, Nathan, and Tammy. I smothered them each with a pillow because I'm not a good mother." When asked why she killed Tammy Lynn, her answer was 4 words: because she was always crying. She was arrested February 5, 1986, charged with second-degree murder, but only for Tammy Lynn. Prosecutors believed they could only prove the one death beyond reasonable doubt. She would never face trial for the other 8. Her trial opened June 22, 1987 in Schenectady County Court. The prosecution centered on the confession, on her refusal of the breathing monitor, on the testimony of Dr. Marie Valdez de Pina, president of the SIDS Foundation, who testified Tammy Lynn had been smothered with a soft object, and on Joseph Tinning's own testimony that his wife had told him, "I killed Tammy." The defense called it all a coercion. They argued genetic disease. They brought in Dr. Jack Davies, who told the jury, "Frankly, I think this may be a new syndrome, a new disease." Marybeth did not take the stand. On July 17, 1987, after 23 hours of deliberation spread over 3 days, the jury came back. Guilty. Second-degree murder. Depraved indifference to human life. On October 1, 1987, Marybeth Tinning was sentenced to 20 years to life. As she stood before the court and claimed innocence, voices from the gallery shouted, "Baby killer," and "bitch." The district attorney called her a wicked woman. Joseph Tinning told reporters he still thought his wife was innocent. She was denied parole 6 times. 6 times, year after year. She sat in front of a board, and they sent her back to her cell. Finally, on July 10, 2018, after 31 years behind bars, age 76, Marybeth Tinning was granted parole. She was released on August 21, 2018, and discharged from supervision on July 22, 2023, at age 80. She lives in Schenectady County today, quietly, among neighbors who mostly keep to themselves about it. The system that failed 9 children over 14 years never fully answered for itself. Different hospitals handled different deaths. No single doctor saw the full picture. Medical examiner Dr. Robert Sullivan said it plainly, "If anyone is negligent, I suppose I am. I probably should have said, there must be more to it than this. But we all think and don't do." 9 children. 1 conviction. 1 woman who walked free. Marybeth Tinning smothered her children for attention. And for 14 years, she got it. Case 2, Waneta Hoyt. They called it science. They published it in one of the most respected medical journals in America. Pediatricians across the country read it, cited it, built careers on it. Hundreds of papers referenced it. It shaped how doctors diagnosed infant death for more than 2 decades. It was all built on murder. Waneta Ethel Hoyt was born May 13, 1946, in Richford, Tioga County, rural upstate New York, the kind of place where everybody knew your business and nobody asked hard questions. She was the 6th of 8 children. At age 11, she got measles that left her with severely impaired eyesight. She met Timothy Hoyt on a school bus when they were in 9th grade. They married January 11, 1964, when Waneta was 17. Her parents refused to attend the wedding. They settled in Newark Valley, a farming town about 70 miles south of Syracuse. Timothy worked sporadically in construction before landing a job as a security guard at Cornell University. They wanted children. What happened next defies every instinct of love and nature. Eric Hoyt was born October 17, 1964. He was 3 months old when he died on January 26, 1965. SIDS, the doctors said. Waneta later told investigators, "I suffocated Eric in the living room. He was crying all the time, and I wanted to stop him." She said she asked God to forgive her over and over. God did not stop her. James Hoyt was born May 31, 1966. Julie Hoyt was born July 19, 1968. In September of 1968, one catastrophic month, both children died within 21 days of each other. Julie died September 5th. She was only 48 days old. Waneta told doctors the infant choked while being fed rice cereal. Her confession was different. "I cradled her up to my shoulder. When she quit crying, I released her, and she wasn't breathing." James died September 26th. He was 2 years and 4 months old enough to know something was wrong, old enough to fight, old enough to call for his mother by name. In her confession, Waneta described what happened to James with a detail so horrifying it silences every room that hears it. He kept screaming, "Mommy, mommy." "I used a bath towel to smother him. He got a bloody nose from fighting against the towel." He was 28 months old. He was the longest surviving biological child she ever had. After 3 deaths, the case attracted the attention of Dr. Alfred Steinschneider, a SIDS researcher at Upstate Medical Center in Syracuse who believed he had found the key to unlocking the mystery of sudden infant death. He admitted Waneta's 4th child, Molly, born March 18, 1970, to his research unit to study sleep apnea. Molly became the first baby in the United States sent home on an apnea monitor. The very next day after discharge, Molly was dead. Waneta claimed the machine malfunctioned. Noah Hoyt was born May 9, 1971. Steinschneider admitted Noah to his unit as well. On July 2nd, Timothy Hoyt went to a clinic and had a vasectomy. He believed something hereditary was killing his children, and he could not bear to put another baby through it. Noah was discharged from the hospital July 27th. He died July 28th. He was 2.5 months old. That same year, 1972, Dr. Steinschneider published his paper, Prolonged Apnea and the Sudden Infant Death Syndrome, in the journal Pediatrics. He identified Molly and Noah only as MH and NH and argued that their repeated near-death episodes and their deaths proved a hereditary link between sleep apnea and SIDS. The paper was cited 404 times between 1974 and 1996. It became the foundation of SIDS research for a generation. It led directly to the widespread use of cardiorespiratory home monitors in pediatric care. It fostered the unquestioned assumption that SIDS runs in families. Every citation was building on murder. Nurses at Upstate Medical Center had been suspicious of Waneta for years. Nurse Thelma Schneider later testified, "There was no bonding at all. Most of us went to Dr. Steinschneider and expressed our fears. We had a gut feeling that something was going on." When a nurse asked him directly whether he wanted to know what was happening inside that home, he dismissed the question. After the trial, Steinschneider was asked about the possibility his research subjects had been murdered. He conceded, "For all I know, they could have been suffocated." His research was not retracted until decades later. The case stayed cold for more than 20 years. Then, in 1985, a prosecutor named William Fitzpatrick, working on an unrelated case, consulted forensic pathologist Dr. Linda Norton of Dallas. She had read Steinschneider's paper. She told Fitzpatrick, "You know, you have a serial killer right there in Syracuse." By 1992, Fitzpatrick was the district attorney of Onondaga County. He tracked down the family. He sent autopsy records to Dr. Michael Baden, who confirmed they were all healthy children. They had no natural cause for death. The only reasonable cause is homicidal suffocation. On March 23, 1994, New York State Police investigator Robert Courtright approached Waneta at a local post office, inviting her to come in to help with SIDS research. She agreed. Inside the station, as investigator Susan Mulvey gently held Waneta's hand and spoke to her quietly, Waneta Hoyt confessed to killing all 5 of her children. She did it in 15 minutes. "I didn't want them to die," she said. "I just wanted them to quiet down. They just kept crying and crying, and I just kept squeezing and squeezing and squeezing." She later recanted. Timothy called the confession coerced. She was used like an old tire. The trial opened March 30, 1995 at Tioga County Court in Owego, New York. Waneta took the stand herself. She denied everything. Ambulance worker Robert Vanek told the jury about the night James died. "I thought, 3 in a row? It bothered me." It took the jury fewer than 5 hours to return their verdict on April 22, 1995. Guilty. 5 counts of second-degree murder. She was sentenced on September 11, 1995, ironically, her own birthday, to 75 years to life in prison. 15 years per murder, served consecutively. Judge Segueglia addressed her at sentencing. "I only have one thing to say to you, and that is to consider your 6th child. Whatever you tell this court, your husband, your God, you owe it to that boy to tell him the truth." Waneta and Timothy's adopted son Jay, approximately 19 years old, bowed his head and wept. Waneta Hoyt never told the truth again. She died of pancreatic cancer on August 13, 1998, at Bedford Hills Correctional Facility. She was 52 years old. Under New York law, because she died while her appeal was still pending, her conviction was automatically vacated, a legal technicality that has no bearing on what she did. She killed 5 babies between 1965 and 1971. The medical establishment handed her a protective shield, and for nearly 3 decades, the world called it science. Case 3, Awilda Lopez. She had a prince in her corner. A literal prince, Prince Michael of Greece, had met this little girl at her Montessori school and been so moved by her intelligence and joy that he offered to fund her entire education, from that classroom all the way through 12th grade. He wrote the letters. He made the calls. He showed up in court documents. He begged the system to protect her. The system gave her back to her mother, and the mother killed her. Elisa Izquierdo was born February 11, 1989, at Woodhull Hospital in Brooklyn. She came into the world already fighting, born addicted to crack cocaine, fragile and small. Her father, Gustavo Izquierdo, won full custody. He enrolled Elisa in a Montessori preschool where she absolutely thrived. Teachers described her as joyful, sharp, magnetic. The prince visited the school in 1993, and Elisa jumped into his arms. He told reporters years later, "She was a lively, charming, beautiful girl." He offered to fund everything. Elisa sent him handwritten thank you notes and drawings. Her mother, Awilda Lopez, was a crack cocaine addict who had already lost custody of 2 older children. She began receiving unsupervised visitation in November of 1991. Immediately, Elisa came home bruised. Bruises on her arms. Bruises on her face. Evidence of genital trauma. Elisa was wetting the bed, vomiting, having nightmares. She told her teachers, "Awilda hits me. I don't want to go to Awilda." School staff reported it. ACS investigated. Nothing happened. Then, on May 26, 1994, Gustavo Izquierdo died of lung cancer. He had planned to take Elisa to Cuba on that very date. In the weeks before his death, he begged anyone who would listen not to give Elisa to Awilda. He recorded his wishes formally. Nobody listened. In September of 1994, Family Court Judge Phoebe Greenbaum awarded full custody of 6-year-old Elisa Izquierdo to Awilda Lopez. Gustavo's cousin Elsa Canizares had attended the hearings without a lawyer, trying to fight for Elisa. Awilda had legal aid representation, a federally funded parenting program supporting her case, and a history of positive-sounding drug treatment paperwork. The prince's letters were in the file. The principal's letters were in the file. The abuse reports were in the file. Elisa went home with Awilda. What followed was, in the words of NYPD Lieutenant Luis Gonzalez, a 22-year veteran, the worst case of child abuse I have ever seen. Awilda withdrew Elisa from school immediately. She enrolled her briefly at PS 126, where teachers saw bruising and extreme withdrawal, then pulled her out entirely in December of 1994 to keep her away from mandated reporters. She returned to regular crack use. She believed, apparently genuinely and obsessively, that Elisa was carrying a spiritual curse placed by her father, and that the curse had to be beaten out of the child. What she did to that little girl over the next 11 months is almost impossible to narrate without stopping to breathe. She forced Elisa to eat her own feces. She forced her to drink water mixed with ammonia. She used Elisa's head and face to mop the floors. She burned her, on her head, face, lips, and body. She hung her from a shower rod for entertainment. She sexually violated her with a toothbrush and a hairbrush. She locked her in her bedroom and denied her access to a toilet. She called her mongoloid and filthy little whore. She punched and kicked her while her other children watched. Neighbors in the building heard it all. They heard the child screaming, "Mommy, Mommy, please stop. No more. No more." I'm sorry. There were at least 8 contacts with child welfare agencies during this period. School social worker Margarita Cotto filed report after report. Each time, the system failed. On November 20th, 1995, Awilda threw Elisa headfirst into a concrete wall. The 6-year-old girl immediately lost the ability to walk or speak. Awilda left her lying on a bed, unconscious and drooling, for 2 full days. On November 22nd, Awilda called her sister Mercy Torres to say Elisa was like retarded on the bed, with fluid leaking from her nose and mouth. Torres told her to take the child to a hospital immediately. Awilda said she would think about it after she finished the dishes. On November 23rd, a neighbor found no signs of life in the apartment and told Awilda to call the police. Awilda refused. The neighbor called instead. When officers arrived, Awilda ran to the roof and threatened to jump. The autopsy report was a catalog of sustained, deliberate torture. Brain hemorrhage from blunt force trauma. Every rib visible through bruised, scarred skin. Broken fingers, one bone protruding through the skin. A broken toe. Damage to internal organs. Evidence of genital and rectal trauma. 30 circular marks on her body, consistent with ring impressions from repeated blows. And in her stomach, one single kernel of corn. One kernel of corn. Elisa Izquierdo was 6 years old. On June 25, 1996, Awilda Lopez pleaded guilty to second-degree murder before Judge Alvin Schlesinger. When he asked her, "Is that what happened?" she mumbled, "Okay." Schlesinger's response was immediate and withering. "Don't okay me. You are not making a bargain." She was sentenced July 31st, 1996 to 15 years to life. Judge Schlesinger. "The system has failed to protect our babies, and don't tell me how much it costs." Elisa's law was signed by Governor Pataki on February 12, 1996. It reduced confidentiality in child protective cases and required public disclosure of reports on child deaths from abuse. Mayor Giuliani's subsequent review led to the creation of the Administration for Children's Services, ACS, as a standalone agency. Time magazine put Elisa on the cover. A shameful death. At her funeral, attended by 300 mourners including Prince Michael of Greece, the Reverend said Elisa was murdered, not only by her own mother, but by the silence of many, by the neglect of child welfare institutions, and the moral mediocrity that has intoxicated our neighborhoods. On her grave at Cypress Hills Cemetery, the headstone reads, "World, please watch over the children." Awilda Lopez was released from Taconic Correctional Facility on April 19, 2022, after serving over 25 years. Elisa Izquierdo would have been 33 years old. Case 4. Nixzaliz Santiago. She heard everything. Every single sound that came from that bathroom. Every strike. Every scream. Every moment her 7-year-old daughter called out, "Mommy, Mommy, Mommy." She heard it all. And she did nothing. Nix Mary Brown was born July 18, 1998 in Brooklyn, New York. She was one of 6 children living in a crowded apartment at 571 Green Avenue in Bedford-Stuyvesant. Her mother was Nixzaliz Santiago, age 27. Her stepfather was Cesar Rodriguez, also 27, an unemployed security guard who had lost his job just days before Christmas of 2005. That detail matters. because the abuse escalated when the money ran out and Rodriguez had nothing to do with his days but rage. By the time Nixzaliz died on January 11, 2006, she weighed 36 pounds. 36 pounds. An average 7-year-old girl weighs closer to 50. She was eating cat food. She was forced to use a litter box because Rodriguez had decided she did not deserve to use the toilet. She was bound to a chair in a sealed-off room, tied with rope, bungee cords, and duct tape, while the rest of the family ate in the kitchen. She had not attended school in months. 2 ACS complaints had been filed. The first came from a guidance counselor at PS 256 who had documented 46 unexplained absences and visible bruising. A caseworker visited in May of 2005, then waited 6 weeks to contact the school and closed the case as unfounded on July 8 of that year. The second complaint came in December 2005 after Nixzaliz appeared at school with a 2-inch cut on her forehead. ACS caseworker Vanessa Roden visited. She did not believe Nixzaliz was in an unsafe environment. After that visit, caseworkers were repeatedly barred from the apartment door. Not one of them obtained a court order or sought a warrant to force entry. 14 ACS staff members were later terminated or disciplined. The family social worker, Margarita Cotto, the same woman who had begged the system to act in the Elisa Izquierdo case more than a decade earlier, had filed report after report. Again, on the evening of January 10, 2006, Nixzaliz snuck a cup of yogurt from the kitchen. She was starving. She ate without permission. When Rodriguez found out, he erupted. He locked her in her room. When his printer jammed later that evening, one of his stepsons blamed Nixzaliz. Rodriguez burst into her room. He beat her with his thick leather belt. He beat her with his fists. He stripped her naked, dragged her to the bathroom, and slammed her head into the bathtub. He forced her head beneath freezing cold water. Nixzaliz screamed, "Mommy, mommy, mommy," from that bathroom. The sound echoed through the apartment. Nixzaliz Santiago stood in the hallway and did not move. Medical evidence later established that Nixzaliz received her fatal head injury approximately 2 days before she died, meaning she lay in that apartment, in a coma, gurgling, gasping, unable to speak or move for 2 days. Neither her mother nor her stepfather called for help. On January 11, 2006, Nixzaliz Brown was dead. At the autopsy, medical examiners documented blunt force trauma to the head, a skull fracture, internal brain bleeding, malnourishment, ligature marks on her wrists and ankles from where she had been bound. At 36 pounds, her ribs were visible through her skin. Cesar Rodriguez stood trial first in January of 2008. He was convicted of first-degree manslaughter. The jury acquitted him of murder and sentenced to 29 years by Justice L. Priscilla Hall. Nixzaliz Santiago went to trial in September of 2008. Prosecutor Ada Ahmed Duimo argued the case with a clarity that cut through everything. She didn't protect, didn't love, didn't nurture. She reminded the jury that Nixzaliz's last audible words were her mother's name, called over and over from that bathroom, and that her mother heard and chose silence. On October 23, 2008, Nixzaliz Santiago was convicted of first-degree manslaughter, along with assault, unlawful imprisonment, and endangering the welfare of a child. She was sentenced to 43 years, longer than the man who delivered the fatal blows. Justice Patricia D. Mango, who had also presided over the Marcella Pierce case, addressed her directly. "You had a duty to act. You were the mother." And then, in the most devastating words of her sentencing remarks, "By your own statements, she gasped for air, moaning, and called for you twice until she died. You, Mrs. Santiago, ignored the desperate calls and left this little 7-year-old alone, and you did nothing." Ada Duimo after the verdict. "Today was a good day for children, because this jury said that parents have a duty. It's not just what you do, but what you don't do." The sentence was reduced on appeal to 33 1/3 to 36 years. Nixzaliz Santiago remains incarcerated. ACS hired 525 new workers after Nixzaliz's death. They launched the Child Stat Accountability Program, modeled on the NYPD's CompStat system. Caseworkers were mandated to seek entry orders when denied access to a home. Reforms, again. After a dead child, again. Nixzaliz Brown deserved to live. She deserved the yogurt she took from that refrigerator on the last night of her life. She was 7 years old and she was starving. She reached for food in her own kitchen and it cost her her life. Her name should not be forgotten. Case 5, Carlotta Brett-Pierce. She was born too soon. She spent the first years of her life in hospitals and long-term care facilities, learning how to breathe, learning how to eat, beating the odds one day at a time. Photographs from her care facility show a round-faced little girl with a wide smile. She had already survived more in 4 years than most people face in a lifetime. Then she went home to her mother. And she never came back. Marcella Brett-Pierce was born premature in 2006, 15 to 17 weeks early, her twin sister dying in the womb. She came into the world requiring a tracheal breathing tube and receiving nutrition through a feeding tube. She spent the vast majority of her early years in hospitals and in long-term care, her fragile body slowly growing stronger under the watch of nurses who described her as warm, gentle, and full of life. In February of 2010, she was released to the care of her mother, Carlotta Brett-Pierce, age 30, who lived in a Bedford-Stuyvesant apartment on Madison Street in Brooklyn with her 2 other children and her own mother, Loretta Brett. Marcella had just learned to eat soft foods. She was doing well. She was going home. By March of 2010, she was back in the hospital, her tracheal tube malfunctioning. Doctors tried to show Carlotta how to clean and maintain the tube properly. Medical staff noted she was indifferent. Doctors contacted the statewide Central Register. ACS sent an investigator who raised concerns. Nobody followed up. Carlotta Brett-Pierce did not want help maintaining her daughter's medical equipment. She wanted her daughter tied to a broken plastic toddler bed. Between July and September of 2010, Carlotta strapped Marcella to that broken yellow plastic toddler bed with a jump rope. She beat her with household objects, including a VHS videotape case. She denied her food and water. And then she found something else. She found the over-the-counter antihistamines. Over a period of weeks, Carlotta force-fed Marcella approximately 60 adult doses of Claritin and approximately 30 doses of Benadryl, sedating her own 4-year-old daughter into unconsciousness repeatedly, deliberately, and systematically. Marcella did not cry because Marcella could not stay conscious long enough to cry. On September 2, 2010, police arrived at the apartment. Marcella Brett-Pierce had been dead for some time. She weighed 18.8 pounds, roughly half the expected weight of a 4-year-old child. Her ribs were visible through bruised, scarred, and scratched skin. Her wrists showed ligature marks from the jump rope. Twine was still attached to the headboard of the broken bed. Boxes of Claritin, sleeping pills, and Benadryl were scattered throughout the cluttered apartment. The contents of Marcella's stomach at autopsy: 1 single kernel of corn. 1 kernel of corn, a detail that echoed the Elisa Izquierdo case 15 years earlier, as if New York City had not learned a single thing. Brooklyn District Attorney Charles J. Hines brought charges not just against Carlotta Brett-Pierce, but also against ACS caseworker Damon Adams, who had allegedly falsified records to show home visits that never occurred, and his supervisor, Cherry Spell. It was the first time in New York City history that child welfare workers faced homicide charges in connection with a child's death. Hines used a single Italian word at the press conference: basta. It means enough. Both workers ultimately pleaded guilty to misdemeanor charges and served no jail time. Adams said he could sleep at night knowing he did everything he could. Marcella's 7-year-old brother Timel testified at trial via closed-circuit television. He told the court quietly that his sister wasn't often fed. The jury deliberated for fewer than 1 hour. Guilty of murder. At sentencing on June 6, 2012, before Justice Patricia D. Mango, who had by this point presided over both the Nix Mary Brown and Marcella Pierce cases, the assistant district attorney read into the record a detail about Marcella's brother that stopped the entire courtroom. On the day of Marcella's funeral, her brother brought food to the church. He brought food, the ADA said, because he knew she didn't get enough. He had told his foster mother, "I hope she gets enough food and water in heaven." Carlotta Brett-Pierce was sentenced to 32 years to life, 25 years for murder plus 7 for assault. A 100-year order of protection was issued barring her from any contact with her 2 surviving children. At sentencing, Carlotta said, "I do accept responsibility, but I do not accept responsibility for my daughter's actual death, because I did not kill her." I want the people to see that I am a loving and caring mother of 3. She said this after her daughter's brother brought food to the funeral because he knew she didn't get enough to eat. Loretta Brett, grandmother, former Head Start teacher with a college degree, co-defendant, was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 5 to 15 years. Marcella Brett-Pierce was 4 years old. She survived being born more than 3 months early. She survived the NICU. She survived tracheotomies and feeding tubes and procedures that would break a full-grown adult. She was extraordinary. She was strong. She came into this world fighting against every odd, and she would have kept fighting. She just needed someone to fight for her. Case 6, Stacey Castor. She killed her first husband. She killed her second husband. And when she realized the police were closing in, she poisoned her own daughter and typed a fake confession letter to blame it all on her. The letter had one fatal flaw. She spelled antifreeze as anti-free. Stacey Ruth Castor was born July 24, 1967, in Clay, New York, a suburb north of Syracuse in Onondaga County. She was, by all outward appearances, a functioning, capable woman. She held jobs, maintained friendships, attended neighborhood gatherings. But beneath that surface was a person who viewed the people closest to her as means to an end, and who had apparently decided that antifreeze was a convenient way to remove obstacles. Her first husband, Michael Wallace, married her on April 7, 1990. They had 2 daughters, Ashley, born 1988, and Bree, born 1991. In late 1999, Michael began feeling sick intermittently. He was found unresponsive on the family sofa on January 11, 2000, at age 38. The cause was ruled a heart attack. Stacey collected $55,000 in life insurance. She refused his sister's request for an autopsy. When Michael's body was exhumed on September 5, 2007, 7 years later, it was, in the words of forensic investigators, loaded with crystals. Calcium oxalate, the unmistakable biological signature of antifreeze poisoning. Her father, Jerry Daniels, died February 22, 2002, in a hospital where he had been improving. Stacey visited the day before and brought him an open can of soda. He died suddenly overnight. Stacey had him cremated before any investigation could begin. Her second husband, David Castor, married her on August 16, 2003. On August 22, 2005, Stacey called police claiming David had locked himself in the bedroom. Officers kicked in the door. David was face down in his own vomit. Near the body, a container of antifreeze and 2 glasses, one containing bright green liquid. In the kitchen trash, a turkey baster. Swabbed and tested, it contained antifreeze and David Castor's DNA. Prosecutors argued Stacey used it to force the liquid into his body when he became too weak to drink. David's fingerprints were not on the antifreeze container. They were not on the glass. His will had been forged. As investigators began building the case against her, Stacey Castor made what was perhaps the most audacious and most cold-blooded decision of her entire life. She would not wait to be arrested. She would not run. She would find a way to make the murders disappear by loading them onto the shoulders of her own daughter. Ashley Wallace was 20 years old in September of 2007. On September 13th, Stacey invited Ashley over to celebrate her upcoming 21st birthday. She prepared drinks. She told Ashley to put the straw to the back of her throat and just drink it. Ashley drank. 17 hours later, Ashley was found by her sister Bree, barely breathing, unresponsive. A typed suicide note had appeared beside her, 750 words long, confessing in Ashley's name to poisoning both Michael Wallace and David Castor. District Attorney William Fitzpatrick later said Ashley was 15 minutes from death when Bree found her. The note had a problem. For times, the word antifreeze was spelled anti-free. The same mispronunciation Stacey had let slip in a prior police interview, catching herself mid-word. Well, when I poured the anti-free. I mean the cranberry juice. Computer forensics established that the note was written on Stacey Castor's personal computer, on a day when Ashley was at school. The note carried Stacey's fingerprints, not Ashley's, not a single print from the woman who allegedly wrote it. The trial opened January 13, 2009 in Onondaga County Court. Judge Joseph Fahey presided. The defense strategy was remarkable for its cruelty. They tried to blame Ashley for everything. They argued she had killed Michael Wallace herself when she was 11 years old. Ashley testified. She was composed and devastating. The jury deliberated for 16 hours. On February 5, 2009, Stacey Castor was convicted of second-degree murder, attempted second-degree murder, and forging a will. On March 5, 2009, Judge Fahy sentenced her to 51 and a third years to life in prison. His remarks at sentencing were measured, precise, and absolute. In my 34 years in the criminal justice system as a lawyer and a judge, I have seen serial killers, contract killers, killers of every variety and stripe. I have never seen a parent attempt to murder their own child in order to cover up the murder they committed and blame it on the child they tried to kill. He declared her in a class all by yourself. Ashley's statement at sentencing was among the most honest things spoken in that courtroom. I never knew what hate was until now. Even though I do hate her, I still love her at the same time. That bothers me. It is so confusing. How can you hate someone and love them at the same time? She survived, and she asked the question that nobody could answer for her, because there is no answer that makes it hurt less. Stacey Castor died of a heart attack at Bedford Hills Correctional Facility on June 11, 2016, at age 48. She never admitted to a single killing. She carried her denials to her grave. Her earliest possible parole date had been June 15, 2055, 1 month before what would have been her 88th birthday. Case 7, Lacey Spears. She built a following, tens of thousands of social media posts, a blog called Garnett's Journey, Facebook updates from hospital rooms, photographs of a sick little boy with tubes and monitors, surrounded by stuffed animals and get-well cards. She called him Garnett the Great. She called him My Little Prince. Her followers called her brave. They called her an inspiration. They called her a devoted mother. While she was poisoning him, Lacey Spears was born October 16, 1987, in Decatur, Alabama. She moved to Chestnut Ridge in Rockland County, New York, in 2012, settling at the Fellowship Community, an alternative intentional community. She was described by people who knew her as intensely needy for attention and impossible to satisfy with normal amounts of it. She fabricated a biography for Garnett's father, claiming he was a police officer named Blake who had died in a car accident. The real father, a neighbor named Chris Hill, was alive and unaware he had a son for years. Garnett Paul Thompson Spears was born December 3, 2008. From the first weeks of his life, he was in and out of medical facilities. At 9 weeks, stomach surgery. At 10 weeks, elevated sodium, a level of 180, when the normal range sits around 140. At just 5 weeks, one Alabama doctor documented suspicion of Munchausen syndrome by proxy. That note was filed. Nothing came of it. By the time Garnett was 1 year old, he had been hospitalized 23 times or more. At 9 months, doctors surgically inserted a G-tube, a feeding tube directly into his stomach, because Lacey insisted he could not keep food down. Friends who spent time with Garnett separately from Lacey described him eating pizza, nuts, fruit, and snacks with no difficulty whatsoever. Meanwhile, the blog kept growing. The posts kept coming. The sympathy kept flowing. On January 17, 2014, Garnett was admitted to Nyack Hospital with seizure-like symptoms. His sodium level on admission, a normal 138. Lacey consented to video EEG monitoring. The cameras were running. Hospital surveillance footage captured Lacey taking Garnett into the bathroom twice, each time carrying a white cup and a G-tube connector. Both times, shortly after returning to the room, Garnett fell violently ill. His sodium spiked from 144 to 182 in approximately 5 hours. When a physician at Westchester Medical Center received that number, the reaction was instinctive and urgent. 182. No, then you need to repeat it. That's impossible. It was not impossible. Garnett went into cardiac arrest. He was airlifted to Maria Ferrari Children's Hospital. The sodium level had caused irreversible swelling in his brain. He was placed on life support and declared brain dead. Garnett Paul Spears died on January 23, 2014. He was 5 years old. Before leaving the hospital, Lacey Spears called her friend Valerie Plosh and asked her to dispose of a feeding bag. Get rid of it and don't tell anybody. Plosh hesitated. Then she called the police. Investigators recovered 2 feeding bags. Lab analysis confirmed both contained sodium levels equivalent to approximately 69 small salt packets each. Open containers of Himalayan salt were found in Lacey's apartment. Her internet search history showed Google searches for dangers of high sodium and hypernatremia made 9 days before Garnett died. The trial opened February 3, 2015 in Westchester County. Second Deputy DA Patricia Murphy argued the motive plainly. She apparently craved the attention of her family, her friends, her coworkers, and most particularly the medical profession. She didn't care if he lived or died. This case has never been about Garnett. It has been about Lacey, the mother of the year. On March 2, 2015, the jury returned a verdict of guilty, depraved indifference murder of a child. Lacey Spears barely flinched. She was sentenced April 8, 2015 to 20 years to life. Judge Neary acknowledged Munchausen syndrome by proxy directly, but still declined to go to the maximum sentence. By not imposing the maximum sentence, he said, "I'm combining your punishment with something that you really did not exhibit toward your son, namely, mercy." DA Janet DeFiore was unambiguous. Throughout his short life, Garnett Spears was forced to suffer through repeated hospitalizations, unneeded surgical procedures, and ultimately poisoning with salt, all at the hands of the one person who should have been his ultimate protector, his mother. Lacey Spears remains at Bedford Hills Correctional Facility. Her earliest possible parole date is June of 2034. Garnett was 5 years old. He had been sick every single day of his short life. He never had a chance to be well because his mother would not allow it. The blog posts are still online if you search for them. Tens of thousands of words about a sick little boy whose mother was the cause of every single hospital visit. Garnett the Great, she called him. She took everything from him. Then she hashtagged it. Case 8, Leatrice Brewer. 2 days before the murders, the call came in. The father called the state child abuse hotline on February 22, 2008. He told them the mother had mental health problems and delusions. She was threatening to put the children outside. Her mental state was placing the children at imminent risk of harm. The notes were clear. The language was direct. The word imminent was right there on the intake form. Caseworkers went to the house. Nobody answered the door. A supervisor decided not to send anyone back on Saturday. On Sunday morning, the 3 children were dead. Leatrice Brewer was 27 years old, standing 6 feet tall, living at 891 Prospect Avenue in New Castle, Nassau County, on Long Island. She had been abandoned by her own mentally ill mother, Pearlie Mae Mickens, who had died of cancer in 2003, and raised by her grandmother, Maybelle Mickens. She had a documented history of depression, drug dependence, and erratic behavior. Neighbors had seen her pushing an empty stroller through the streets while her children were home alone. ACS had investigated 10 separate complaints about Leatrice Brewer in the 5 years prior to February of 2008. 6 were ruled unfounded. 3 required follow-up. The fathers of her children had both gone to Nassau County Family Court seeking custody, presenting the same argument. She was mentally ill and the children were not safe. Family Court had not acted. Her victims were her own 3 children. Jewel Nicole Ward was 6 years old, born June 10, 2001. Michael DeMassieu was 5 years old, born February 10, 2003. Innocent DeMassieu Jr. was 18 months old, born August 26, 2006. In the early morning hours of February 24, 2008, approximately 4 in the morning, Leatrice Brewer woke up. She went to Jewel's room and told her 7-year-old daughter it was time to go. Then she got a knife and slit Jewel's throat. Jewel tried to fight her mother. Brewer placed her back in bed. She carried 18-month-old Innocent to the bathroom and drowned him in the bathtub. She brought him back and laid him beside Jewel. When she returned to Jewel and found her still alive, she took her to the bathroom and drowned her too. Then she returned for 5-year-old Michael and drowned him. She tried to call 911. She hung up. She poured bleach down her own throat. She drank Windex. She swallowed OxyClean and aspirin. She lay down in the bed beside her dead children and closed her eyes. She woke up at 8:30 in the morning. She was still alive. She walked to the window and jumped from the 2nd floor. She broke her back, but survived the fall. She walked to a neighbor's apartment to use the phone. At 8:55 in the morning, she called 911. When the first officer arrived and asked what was wrong, Leatrice Brewer said, calmly, "I jumped out the window, and I killed my kids." The officer found 3 children on a bed, all in pajamas, all dead. Nassau County investigators later reconstructed the full timeline, including the call 2 days earlier. Father Ricky Ward, Jewel's father, said, "Whenever I tried to get my daughter, family court wouldn't let me. I blame this on Leatrice Brewer and family court." Both prosecution and defense psychiatrists reached the same diagnosis: major depressive disorder with psychotic features, hallucinations, and paranoia. She had been experiencing delusions, including beliefs rooted in voodoo and spiritual harm. She believed she was saving her children, not harming them. On February 9, 2009, Leatrice Brewer was found not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect. She was committed indefinitely to Mid-Hudson Forensic Psychiatric Center. While institutionalized, she became pregnant by another patient and gave birth to a 4th child, who was placed in foster care. She subsequently filed a petition claiming $350,000 from wrongful death settlements that her children's fathers had won against Nassau County. Surrogates Court Judge Edward McCarty III rejected the petition, ruling it would be repugnant to decency. On March 1, 2008, 1 week after the murders, a funeral was held at St. John's Baptist Church in Westbury. 3 children lay together in a single white coffin. 6-year-old Jewel had her arms wrapped around her 2 younger brothers. Hundreds of people came. There was not one person in that church who did not know the state had been warned. Case 9, LaShanda Armstrong. She was 25 years old. She was in college. She was working full-time. She had 4 children by herself in an apartment in Newburgh, New York, holding everything together with no support and a partner who was destroying her from the inside. On April 12, 2011, she posted on Facebook from her BlackBerry at 7:13 in the evening, "I'm so sorry, everyone forgive me please for what I'm gonna do. This is it." 50 minutes later, she drove off a boat ramp at the end of Washington Street in Newburgh directly into the Hudson River. Her 3 youngest children drowned. Her 10-year-old son escaped by climbing out the driver's window. The Hudson River was 45 degrees Fahrenheit that night. It was raining. LaShanda Renee Armstrong had her first child at age 15. By 25, she was raising 4 children largely by herself while working full-time and attending Orange County Community College. Her boyfriend Jean-Pierre, father to the 3 youngest children, was described by friends and family members in consistent, unambiguous terms: domineering, controlling, manipulative, absent in every way that mattered and corrosive in every way that remained. On the day of the killings, LaShanda attended her math class in the morning. Her classmate Ashani George said she wasn't herself. She seemed angry, off. When she picked up the children from daycare that afternoon, Supervisor Shaniacia Strange observed her quietly. The only thing she'd say was that she was so alone. At 7:13, she posted her goodbye. She made a final phone call to her mother asking for forgiveness. At 7:43, a great-aunt called police about a domestic disturbance at the apartment. By the time officers arrived, the apartment was empty. The family minivan was gone. LaShanda loaded all 4 children, 10-year-old LaShawn, 5-year-old Landon, 2-year-old Lance, and 11-month-old Lainana, into the van and drove less than 1 mile. Washington Street slopes downhill from the apartment, past a school, past a graveyard, past the point where the road flattens out and runs straight into the river. At the end, a boat ramp. No barrier, just concrete dropping into dark water. In the van, LaShawn begged, Mommy, what are you doing?" She told him, "If I'm going to die, you're all going to die with me." She said it 2 or 3 times. Then she climbed from the driver's seat into the back seat and held all her children together. LaShawn broke free. As he was climbing toward the front of the van, he heard his mother speak. She said, "I made a mistake. I made a terrible mistake." She was trying to put the van in reverse. It was too late. The van was already submerging, drifting 25 yards from shore. LaShawn hit the power window button on the driver's side. He crawled through the gap as the window opened. He swam. The van was afloat for approximately 2 minutes before it sank. He reached the bank. He turned around. The van was gone. He stood on the shore in the rain, 10 years old, soaking, until a passing driver named Meave Ryan saw a child waving frantically in the road. He told her, Mom just drove the car into the water. She took him to a nearby firehouse. He kept saying, "It's my fault. It's my fault." He blamed himself for not teaching his little brothers to swim. He blamed himself for not unbuckling his baby sister. Ryan told him, "It's not your fault, LaShanda. You're courageous." The minivan was recovered from 8 to 10 feet of murky water. LaShanda and all 3 young children were found in the back of the vehicle. None of the children had been buckled in. Landon was 5. Lance was 2. Lainana was 11 months old. LaShanda Armstrong was 25. She died in that river alongside her children. NFL linebacker Ray Lewis reached out to LaShanda afterward and provided scholarship support. "I don't want to come into his life for a phase," he said. "I want to be in his life forever." LaShanda was taken in by great-aunt Angela Gilliam. The day after the recovery, LaShanda asked to go back to the river. His aunt took him. He stood on the bank and looked at the water for a long time. She gave him his time. Friend Christine Santos said, "He was terrible to her. He was very domineering and controlling over her. She just wanted a normal family." Daycare supervisor Shaniacia Strange. "She was so alone." Great-aunt Angela Gilliam. "She was a good mother. She was going through some stuff. Nobody knows what my niece went through." The tragedy forced a national conversation about depression in the Black community, about postpartum mental health, about what isolation and an abusive partner can do to a person who is already stretched beyond breaking. Dr. Jeffrey Gardier predicted LaShanda would need at least 15 to 20 years of therapy. LaShanda Armstrong was 10 years old. He swam out of a sinking van in the dark in 45-degree river water after watching his mother try to die. He reached shore. He turned around. He stood there alone. He was 10 years old, and he was the bravest person in Newburgh that night. Case 10, Erin Merdy. Just after midnight on September 12, 2022, a woman walked onto Coney Island beach. She was not alone. She brought her 7-year-old son Zachary. She brought her 4-year-old daughter Liliana. She brought her 3-month-old son Oliver. At approximately 12:37 in the morning, Erin Merdy walked her 3 children into the dark Atlantic Ocean. The water was black. The beach was empty. No one saw them go in. At 1:25 in the morning, surveillance cameras recorded a woman walking alone away from the beach toward Brighton Beach, more than 2 miles away. She was wet. She was not carrying any children. Zachary Merdy, 7 years old. Liliana Stevens Merdy, 4 years old. Oliver Bondarev, 3 months old. Their bodies were found along the Coney Island shoreline. 3 children from one family, dead in the ocean in the middle of the night. Erin Merdy was 30 years old. She had been described by people who knew her as overwhelmed, unstable, and deeply depressed. She was not taking her prescribed mental health medications. The New York City Administration for Children's Services had a prior substantiated case against her, educational neglect, from 2020, that had been opened, addressed briefly, and closed without adequate follow-up. When investigators reviewed what ACS knew in the months leading up to September 12, the New York State Office of Children and Family Services found multiple failures. Warnings that were not followed. Red flags that were not escalated. A file that was not complete. The same language used in 2006 after Nixzaliz Brown. In 2010 after Marchella Pierce. In 2022 after Zachary, Liliana, and Oliver Merdy. Erin Merdy was indicted on 3 counts of first-degree murder and 9 counts of second-degree murder. She faces life in prison without parole if convicted. She is being held without bail. The case draws direct and painful parallels to what happened in Newark Valley in 1971, in Newburgh in 2011, in Westbury in 2008. A mother. A crisis. Children who could not protect themselves. A system that had the information and did not act in time. A former shelter worker who had known the family described the children simply, beautiful souls. Zachary had just turned 7. He had his whole life ahead of him. Liliana was 4. Oliver was 3 months old, 3 months, with a name that sounds like a prayer. As of the latest available information, the case against Erin Merdy remains pending in Brooklyn courts. 10 cases. 10 women. 22 children who did not get to grow up. From Schenectady to Brooklyn, from Long Island to the Hudson Valley, from 1965 to 2022. The state of New York has watched children die in their mother's arms over and over and over again. And each time, after the funeral and the verdict and the newspaper headlines, someone stands at a podium and announces a new policy. More caseworkers, better training, improved oversight, stricter protocols, stronger laws. And then the cycle begins again. The names on this list: Tammy Lynn, Noah, Elisa, Nixzaliz, Marcella, Garnett, Jewel, Michael, Innocent, Landon, Lance, Lainana, Zachary, Liliana, Oliver. These are not statistics. They are not cautionary tales. They are not case numbers in a database. They were children who laughed, who played, who had favorite foods and fears and songs they liked. They were children who called for their mothers when they were afraid, and whose mothers were the reason they were afraid. The systems designed to protect them failed. The doctors who should have seen the pattern looked away. The caseworkers who should have knocked harder did not come back. The judges who should have asked harder questions gave the benefit of the doubt to the wrong person. And still those children showed up. In school, in hospitals, in courtrooms, through the testimony of teachers and neighbors and siblings, asking the world to see them, to say something, to do something. We owe it to every one of them to keep saying their names. If this documentary moved you, if it made you feel something, if you believe these children deserved better, please like this video right now. Leave a comment. Tell us which case hit you hardest. Share this with someone who needs to hear these stories. And if you are not already subscribed to Silent True Crime Stories, hit that subscribe button and the bell notification so you never miss an episode. We do this work because these stories matter. Because silence is what allowed so many of these children to be forgotten while they were still alive. And we refuse to be silent. Thank you for watching. Thank you for witnessing. We will see you in the next case.